The underestimation. The Araxian Empire had ruled the Orion Arm for 10,000 years. Their sleek warships, gleaming with bronze and emerald, had conquered 100 worlds and subjugated 1,000 species. When their long-range sensors detected the energy signatures of nuclear fission from a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, they didn't even bother sending their elite forces. Earth would be just another conquest, another jewel in their ancient crown. High Commander Zex Taller stood on the command deck of the inevitable Victory, his 4 arms folded behind his back as he gazed at the holographic representation of Earth rotating slowly before him. The blue planet seemed peaceful, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon it. Primitive technology, minimal orbital defenses, and fractured global governance, reported Science Officer Kirella, her gray skin reflecting the cool light of the hologram. They've only achieved basic spaceflight and have no unified defense protocol. Conquest estimate, 3 standard cycles. Zextalar's mouth tentacles twitched in what passed for a smile among the Araxians. 3 cycles. That's generous. I'd wager we could have their leaders begging for mercy within one. The bridge crew chittered in amusement. They had seen this scenario play out dozens of times before. A young species, barely space-capable, suddenly discovering they weren't alone in the universe, and that their place in the cosmic hierarchy was at the bottom. Initiate first contact protocol, Zex Taller ordered. Let's see what these humans are made of before we decide how to break them. The Araxian first contact was deliberately overwhelming. A display of 20 warships materializing in Earth's orbit, their massive hulls blocking out the sun over major cities, casting shadows that chilled the blood of every human who looked up. The message they broadcast to every communication device on the planet was simple: submit to the Araxian Empire or face extinction. Earth's leaders scrambled to respond. Some advocated immediate surrender, others for desperate resistance. The United Earth Defense Council was hastily assembled in Geneva, with representatives from every nation bringing their fears, their anger, and their limited military assets to the table. Admiral Helena Chen sat at the head of the council table, her weathered face grim as she studied the satellite imagery of the alien vessels. 30 years in the Chinese Space Force hadn't prepared her for this. "They're giving us 72 hours to surrender," she said. "After that, they've promised to demonstrate their power by eliminating a non-essential population center." "We can't possibly fight them," said the French representative, his voice cracking. "Their ships are miles long. Our most advanced weapons would be like throwing stones at a tank." Admiral Chen's eyes hardened. "Perhaps, but I study their communications carefully. They're arrogant, overconfident. They don't view us as a threat. They view us as an inconvenience." "And how does that help us?" demanded the Russian general. "Arrogance leads to mistakes," Chen replied. "And we humans have always been good at exploiting mistakes." When the Araxian delegation landed to accept Earth's formal surrender, they were met not with cowering diplomats, but with a tactical nuclear device hidden beneath the meeting site. The explosion vaporized the alien delegates, along with a 5-mile radius of uninhabited desert in the Australian outback. Aboard the inevitable Victory, High Commander Zex Taller's rage was cold and terrible. They dare. A primitive species dares to strike at the Araxian Empire. His voice was controlled, but his secondary arms trembled with fury. "It appears they've chosen extinction," said Kirella, her tone clinical. "Begin the bombardment. Target their military installations first, then their government centers. I want their resistance broken within a day." The Araxian assault was devastating. Kinetic rods dropped from orbit pulverized military bases around the world. Energy beams sliced through aircraft carriers like paper. Humanity's most advanced weapons, stealth bombers, supersonic missiles, even the experimental railguns, seemed pathetically inadequate against Araxian shields and armor. By the end of the first day, Earth's conventional military forces were in ruins. High Commander Zex Taller was preparing to address the human population, to demand their unconditional surrender, when something unexpected happened. A small, seemingly unarmed vessel approached the Araxian fleet. It transmitted no signals, responded to no warnings. When the Araxians fired a warning shot, the vessel exploded, not from the impact, but from within. A massive electromagnetic pulse washed over 3 Araxian ships, shutting down their primary systems and leaving them drifting. "Impossible," whispered Kirella, staring at her readouts. "They shouldn't have EMP technology capable of penetrating our shields." Zextalar's 4 eyes narrowed. "A lucky accident. Dispatch repair drones and continue the assault." But it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't the last surprise. As Araxian landing craft descended to secure key locations, they found themselves targeted by improvised weapons. Commercial drones carrying small explosives that sought out engine intakes, civilian vehicles packed with fertilizer explosives, even manually aimed antique firearms that somehow found the weak points in Araxian battle armor. 3 days into what should have been a simple conquest, High Commander Zextalar faced an unsettling reality. The humans weren't fighting like a military. They were fighting like vermin defending their nest, with desperation, creativity, and a complete disregard for conventional tactics. "They're adapting," Kirella noted, reviewing combat footage from Paris, where humans had used reflective surfaces to redirect Araxian energy weapons back at their source. "Every time we deploy a new tactic, they analyze it and find a countermeasure within hours." "They're still losing," Zextalar insisted. "For every one of our soldiers they manage to kill, we eliminate thousands of them." But something was changing in the High Commander's voice. The easy confidence was gone, replaced by a growing concern. The humans didn't fight like any species the Araxians had encountered before. When their conventional weapons failed, they improvised new ones. When their military leadership was decimated, civilian scientists and engineers stepped forward with innovative defenses. When their cities were destroyed, they retreated underground, into mountains beneath the seas. They should have broken by now. Why hadn't they broken? 1 week into the invasion, the Araxians intercepted a transmission between human resistance cells. The message was simple, and it chilled Zextalar to his core. "We figured out their shield frequency. Adjust accordingly. They bleed just like we do." That night, 6 more Araxian ships went dark. The reckoning. The mood aboard the inevitable Victory had changed. The easy confidence, the certainty of conquest that had defined the first days of the invasion, had evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. High Commander Zextalar stood alone in his chambers, staring at the casualty reports with all 4 of his eyes wide with disbelief. In just 14 days, the humans had destroyed 8 Araxian warships, vessels that had survived centuries of conflict with advanced civilizations throughout the Orion Arm. They had killed over 5,000 Araxian soldiers, each of whom had been worth 100 warriors from any other conquered race, and they had done it with technology that, by Araxian standards, was primitive to the point of being laughable. "How?" Zextalar whispered to the empty room. "How are they doing this?" The door to his chambers hissed open, and Science Officer Kirella entered, her normally composed features tight with strain. "High Commander, I've completed my analysis of human physiology and psychology," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I believe I understand why our standard conquest protocols are failing." "Speak," Zextalar ordered, not turning from the reports. "Humans evolved on a death world," Kirella began. "Earth's gravity is 1.2 times our standard. Its atmospheric pressure is higher. Its temperature variations are extreme. Its biosphere is filled with predators, pathogens, and environmental hazards that would kill most sentient species in the galaxy. What does this have to do with our military campaign?" "Everything," Kirella said. "Humans didn't achieve spaceflight to spite their environment. They achieved it because of it. They're physiologically adapted to stress, psychologically conditioned to overcome obstacles, and culturally designed to innovate under pressure." Zextalar finally turned, his mouth tentacles writhing with irritation. They're still technologically inferior. Their weapons are crude. Their defenses are minimal. Their technology is crude, Kurella agreed, but their application of it is not. They don't fight according to any doctrine we understand. When conventional tactics fail, they adopt unconventional ones. When their weapons can't penetrate our defenses, they find ways to make our defenses irrelevant. Examples, Zex Teller demanded. Yesterday, they captured an Araxian landing craft by overwhelming its crew, not with superior weapons, but with sheer numbers. They sacrificed hundreds of lives to secure one of our vessels. Last night, they reverse-engineered the craft's propulsion system and used the principles to modify their primitive nuclear weapons to bypass our shields. 3 hours ago, 5 of these modified weapons detonated against the Relentless Conquest. The Relentless Conquest is one of our most powerful dreadnoughts, Zex Teller said, his voice hollow. It was, Kurella corrected quietly. It's now a debris field in Earth's upper atmosphere. The High Commander's hands clenched into fists. We still have overwhelming force. We can still break them. Increase the orbital bombardment. Target their population centers. Their industrial capacity. Their agricultural regions. Starve them into submission. That strategy failed on the Duraxians, the Vesh, and the Kolhari, Kurella reminded him. All species that were less adaptable than humans. I fear that increasing the pressure will only accelerate their innovation. Then what do you suggest? Zex Teller snapped. That we retreat. That the mighty Araxian Empire turns tail and runs from a species that hasn't even colonized its own moon. I suggest we reassess, Kurella said carefully. The cost of conquering Earth may exceed the benefit. Before Zex Teller could respond, the ship's alarms blared. The command deck called, panic evident even through the ship's communication system. High Commander. Multiple human vessels approaching. They've somehow replicated our shield technology. Zex Teller rushed to the command deck. Kurella closed behind. The view screen showed a horrifying sight. Dozens of crude human spacecraft, clearly hastily constructed from repurposed orbital infrastructure, but each surrounded by the unmistakable shimmer of Araxian shield technology. Impossible, Zex Teller breathed. It took our scientists centuries to perfect those shields. It took them 17 days, Kurella corrected, her voice faint with something between terror and awe. The human ships attacked with a ferocity that shocked even the battle-hardened Araxians. They didn't maneuver with the elegance of properly trained space navies. They charged directly at the Araxian fleet, ramming smaller vessels into larger ones, detonating their makeshift reactors when their weapons were depleted, fighting with a desperate fury that seemed to consume any fear of death. Admiral Helena Chin, commanding the human counteroffensive from the jury-rigged bridge of the Defiance, formerly the International Space Station, now humanity's first warship, watched the battle with steel in her eyes. Status report, she demanded. We've destroyed 6 enemy vessels, reported her tactical officer, a former video game designer who had proven unexpectedly brilliant at space combat. We've lost 11 of ours, but the ratio is improving as we adapt to their tactics. Chen nodded. And Project Leviathan. Ready for deployment, Admiral. Then it's time, Chen said. Signal all vessels to fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Activate the Leviathan. As the human fleet retreated, the Araxians pursued, believing they had finally broken the resistance. High Commander Zex Teller allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he ordered his remaining ships to form up for the final assault. They run at last, he said. Prepare the boarding parties. I want survivors for public execution. High Commander, Kurella's voice was urgent. I'm detecting unusual energy readings from Earth's oceans. Multiple signatures, rising rapidly. Before Zex Teller could process this information, the oceans of Earth seemed to erupt. Massive objects, converted nuclear submarines, their hulls reinforced, and their missile tubes now housing modified Araxian weaponry, broke the surface and launched directly into space, propelled by engines scavenged from captured Araxian vessels. These were no elegant spacecraft. They were brute force weapons platforms, designed with a single purpose: to deliver overwhelming firepower at point-blank range. And they had emerged directly beneath the Araxian fleet, in its blind spot. Evasive maneuvers. Zex Taller screamed, but it was too late. The submarine-turned warships slammed into the Araxian vessels, their improvised weapons tearing through shields calibrated to stop energy beams, but not solid projectiles fired from inside the shield perimeter. The inevitable Victory shuddered as multiple impacts rocked its hull. Alarms blared throughout the ship as compartments depressurized, systems failed, and Araxian crew members died by the hundreds. On the command deck, High Commander Zex Taller stared in disbelief at the tactical displays showing his fleet, the pride of the Araxian Empire, being systematically dismantled by a species that, by all logic, should have been on its knees begging for mercy. "We must retreat," Chirella urged, clutching at the High Commander's arm. "We can return with a larger fleet, with new tactics, with—" "No," Zex Taller said, his voice distant. "Don't you see? It wouldn't matter. If they can do this in 3 weeks, what will they be capable of in 3 months? In 3 years? They don't fight like a civilized species. They fight like survivors," Chirella finished. "Like a species that has been fighting its own world since the day it evolved, and winning." The inevitable Victory lurched again as another converted submarine rammed into its engineering section. The lights flickered, and emergency power engaged. "High Commander," the communications officer called out, his voice trembling. "We're receiving a transmission from the humans." "Put it through," Zex Taller said wearily. The view screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Helena Chen. Her uniform was scorched. There was a bandage over one eye, but her remaining eye burned with a cold determination that made Zex Taller flinch. "Araxian Commander," she said without preamble, "your invasion has failed. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire's reputation for invincibility is over. You cannot hope to stand against the full might of the Araxian Empire," Zex Taller said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We just did. And here's what happens next. You will withdraw any surviving forces from Earth space. You will return to your empire. And you will deliver a message." "What message?" Zex Taller asked, dreading the answer. "Earth is off limits," Chen said simply. "Not just to you, but to any species that thinks to conquer us. We didn't want this war. We didn't seek this conflict. But now that you've awakened us to the reality of interstellar threats, know this: we will be ready next time, and we will not be as merciful." The transmission cut off, leaving the command deck in silence. Zex Taller looked around at his officers, seeing in their eyes the same realization that had dawned in his own. They had made a terrible mistake. The Araxian Empire had ruled the Orion Arm for 10,000 years because they had never encountered a species like humanity, a species forged in adversity, tempered by conflict, and defined by an unwillingness to submit no matter the odds. "Order all remaining vessels to disengage," Zex Taller said quietly. "Set course for Araxian space." As the battered remnants of the once mighty fleet limped away from Earth, Science Officer Chirella stepped to the High Commander's side. "What message will you deliver to the Imperial Council?" she asked. Zex Taller stared at the blue planet receding on the view screen, thinking of the species they had awakened, the sleeping giant they had so foolishly roused to fury. "The truth," he said simply, "that we encountered a species unlike any other in the galaxy, a species that views impossibility as a challenge, overwhelming force as a problem to solve, and defeat as merely a temporary setback." He turned away from the view screen, his 4 eyes blinking slowly in the dim emergency lighting. "I will tell them that in all our millennia of conquest, we finally found a species that could not be conquered, and that if the Empire is wise, it will never again dare to challenge humanity." 3 months later, In the newly established United Earth Space Command headquarters beneath the ruins of Geneva, Admiral Chen stood before the representatives of Earth's nations, her uniform now adorned with the insignia of her new rank. Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, the Araxians have withdrawn to their core systems, she reported. Our deep space monitoring stations indicate no sign of a return force. For now, at least, we have peace. And if they return, asked the representative from India, or if another alien empire decides to test our resolve. Chen's smile was grim but confident. Let them come. In 3 months, we've reverse-engineered Araxian shield technology, propulsion systems, and energy weapons. In 6 months, we'll surpass them. In a year, we'll be ready to carry our own message to the stars. What message is that? Asked the representative from Brazil. Admiral Chen looked out at the assembly, at the faces of humanity's leaders, scared, exhausted, but unbowed. That Earth is no longer just our home, she said. It's the birthplace of a species that refused to be conquered, that faced an interstellar empire and forced it to retreat. And any civilization that mistakes our previous isolation for weakness will learn, as the Araxians did, their final mistake. In the vastness of space, aboard what remained of the inevitable victory, High Commander Zex Talar, now stripped of his rank and facing execution for his failure, gazed out at the stars, thinking of the blue planet and the terrible, wonderful species that called it home. They'll come for us one day, he whispered to himself, not for revenge, but because that's what they do. They explore, they expand, they overcome. And the galaxy will never be the same.